Fog lay low over Halifax on the morning of January 28, 1870, the kind that dampened wool coats and swallowed sound. At the far end of the wooden pier, the SS City of Boston took on her last mailbags, while deckhands coiled wet lines and the purser checked names against a ledger. Families crowded the rail for a final wave. An Inman line ensign snapped against the aft stay as the ship's single screw began to churn a brown wake. Captain Alexander Halcrow stood beneath the bridge awning and watched the harbor tug fall away. The bell rang, lines splashed, and the steamer slid past George's Island toward open water with 191 people aboard. 84 crew, 55 cabin passengers, and 52 in steerage. By noon, the lighthouse was astern, and the Atlantic ahead was a flat slate that looked almost kind. The city of Boston was 6 years old, iron-hulled, and 460 feet from stem to stern, built at Glasgow and known on the route for a steady gait. She carried a single tall funnel and compound engines good for about 13 knots. Her saloon was paneled in mahogany, her cabin lamps polished bright for the first night out. Among the passengers were Halifax merchants sailing to England to place spring orders, army officers ending garrison duty, clerks with trunks of papers, mothers keeping children close against the rail. Halcrow gave the usual talk about heavy weather beyond the banks, and the ship vibrated as the engineers found their rhythm below. 2 days later, the barometer fell. Logs kept by westbound packets speak of a violent gale and snow on January 30th that tore canvas like paper and rolled heavy ships until water ran level with the scuppers. Running east into that weather, the city of Boston would have shipped green seas over her bows and felt the propeller race as the stern lifted and fell. In such a sea, small faults turn final quickly. A shaft cracked by fatigue, a stokehold flooded through a smashed deadlight, a steam pipe burst and scalding men off the fires. If smoke rockets were ready and hands free to set them, the wind might still have broken the signal, and the snow swallowed it whole. On the Liverpool side, dockmen expected her masthead lights by the 1st of February. When the date passed, the cable office rattled with queries to Halifax and New York. No word. Other Inman steamers were asked to keep sharp watch along the Great Circle track. Nothing. The Atlantic in winter is a desert where a lost ship leaves no footprints. Newspapers filled the silence with theories and names. Passenger lists ran in black type. One column blamed ice, another feared a boiler explosion. Halifax men who had watched her sail swore she rode properly trimmed, no hurry or overload in her lines. It was known she had been in dock before the voyage for engine work and bunkering. Some wondered whether a repair had failed under strain. Letters of sympathy crossed from Liverpool to Nova Scotia, while families waited for an arrival notice that did not come. Then came rumors that kept hope and dread alive together. A westbound master claimed a sighting off Ireland in late February of a steamer signaling broken engine cylinders. In April, a piece of timber washed ashore at Perranporth with a rough inscription, "City of Boston is sinking." February 11th. Months later, a bottle turned up in Cornwall with a message about a collision and fire. Handwriting was doubtful, dates did not fit, and each claim failed under scrutiny, but every scrap drew one more day of belief. Beneath the headlines were the hard facts of the ship herself. She had rescued people at sea in earlier years and earned a reputation for honest work in bad seasons. She sailed this time under Halcrow, a competent master with a first-rate crew. Her company, the Inman Line, prided itself on reliability and close mail schedules. But iron does not negotiate with a January gale. The Board of Trade inquiry, opened after she failed to make port, had little to examine beyond weather reports and second-hand statements. No wreckage could be proved to be hers. The finding was the stripped sentence that follows so many ocean losses: missing, presumed, foundered in severe weather. Whispers of sabotage trailed that verdict. In Halifax, a name circulated, Alexander Keith Jr., a prosperous brewer later exposed as a forger and explosive schemer. He had no proven link to the city of Boston, but the idea of a bomb hidden among the luggage lodged in the public mind because it made sudden disappearance sound purposeful. Investigators found no proof. The ship left, the storm rose, and she did not arrive. The search for a body to bury lasted longer than the news cycle. In Halifax, memorial services were held beneath high plaster ceilings where every cough echoed. The names of the missing were read into the air and seemed to hang there. In Liverpool, a notice board that usually listed birthing times carried a line that said only overdue. Shippers adjusted their ledgers, families could not. Merchants who expected to walk the warehouses that February left gaps in partnerships on Hollis Street. A young clerk's room stood untouched for months while his brothers argued quietly over whether to pack his books. One merchant had promised his partner he would be back by March with orders for cotton goods and hardware. His wife kept his traveling rug folded at the foot of the bed and would not let the children touch the brass telescope he left on the parlor shelf. Another passenger, a young bandsman returning to Lancashire, carried a cornet in a leather case. The case was listed on the manifest, but nothing carrying his initials ever came ashore. Years turned into habit. Mariners on that lane told stories in mess rooms about flares seen through a squall the winter she vanished, and about hearing, on some nights, an iron bell toll from nowhere across a sheet of fog. Divers and surveyors later ran instruments over the seabed along her intended track and found many wrecks, but none they could confidently call by her name. The Atlantic moved sand with patient hands and covered its dead. The chronology is stark. January 28th, departure from Halifax. January 30th, a gale and snowstorm recorded by ships that survived. February, silence at sea, unverified reports, doubtful messages in bottles. Spring, nothing recovered that could be firmly tied to her. Summer, the inquiry closes. A year later, grief remains while the lanes are busy again and the schedules fill with other names. What does not change is the uneasy fact that a modern vessel, iron-built, well-found, properly commanded, could vanish between one horizon and the next, without a trace to argue with. If there is a lesson here, it is not romantic. A winter Atlantic exposes every weakness, and sometimes needs none at all. It simply takes. A small failure deep in a ship's machinery, joined to ice-cold green water and wind enough to drown a signal, can erase the chance of witness. Sabotage makes a better headline, but storms do not need conspirators. The city of Boston left a wake in Halifax Harbor and then left none. In the small things the ship endures. A brass-framed photograph on a mantel in a Halifax row house, the subject forever 30 in a wool greatcoat. A prayer card pressed into a Bible and kept in a top drawer. A clerk in Liverpool who kept his friend's pen on his desk long after the desk was assigned to someone else. Memory persists where evidence will not. Stand on the pier on a cold morning, with fog lifting and gulls shouldering the wind, and look out toward the headlands. Somewhere beyond them, the great circle track bends across the banks, and beyond that, the open sea continues the work it began that week, moving weather, moving water, and keeping its own counsel. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.